Welcome, everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Exploring the New Age Countdown to Contact, our Season 2, Episode 3. Hi, Julien.
Hi,
How are you?
Don. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great. I'm doing great, too. So what have we got to talk about tonight?
Well, today we've got a very special show. Um, I might probably say that about every show, but
I think
today,
you do,
but
but that's okay.
today is exceptionally special
Okay.
because today we're actually going to be talking almost entirely with Pleiadians. Now,
Ah,
so we'll call this the Pleiadian special. If there was something that is, maybe we could have titled
perfect.
it the Pleiadian special or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're going to get to talk with a couple of them. I don't know if we're going to go all the way to channeling, but what they did want to specifically get into was answering questions about their lifestyle and
Ah, perfect.
about uh, how their lifestyle relates to our own and kind of things we might expect. Um, see, we've gotten a lot of, talk in the public from Pleiadians being, channeled and books written on Pleiadians, as being guides and whatnot, and people feeling, like they're Pleiadian star seeds. Well, there isn't a lot of discussion, they realize, on what Pleiadian life looks like in a very, 3D sort of like, what day-to-day life is like and how things are kind of different for them
Uh-huh.
on planets, in ships, and other dimensional spaces. Because, there's a large range of experiences that Pleiadians have, but even that considered, they still feel that everything that they could talk about on Pleiadian life is narrow compared to what we get out here on Earth. So just to sort of like bridge the gap in terms of what life looks like, we're going to get into that. So today I'm hoping we can get questions from the chat room. So welcome, chat room. I see that you guys got
Well,
started. I know we started a couple minutes late here.
yes, and we're already getting some questions, so that's great.
Okay. Um, I did have a small um idea of how they wanted to sort of like go from subject to subject. So we're going to sort of
Perfect.
narrow it down to various areas. How about
Okay.
that?
Perfect.
So one of the more interesting things to understand is how they procreate. Now you might say, Julian, what are you talking about Pleiadian sex for? I said it's not. That's not what I mean.
Well, you're starting to
Um,
sound like David Wilcock here. Okay, so we'll go right. We'll go right to the sex talk. There we go.
well, right in the sex. Like just keep the topic fresh. No, it's not exactly. We're not going to talk about sex.
Okay.
For the most part, yes, they can have sex like we do. And you can use your imagination for that, but it's not that much different from human level experience. I'm not getting into that because I don't see a whole lot of that. They don't tell me a whole lot about that. But are they shy? No, they're not shy.
Hmm.
Obviously, their expectations are on the table. Pretty much straightforward, and the partners that they come into are not usually very mysterious. They love surprises, but oftentimes they don't really get to have partners where it's a big of a surprise because they've already you know known quite a bit about each other. See, they live a very long time compared to us. They have spans that are at least 100 years um, long. So
Okay.
uh, you know, they kind of get around in the way of meeting each other. So it's not that big. It's not such a huge impact with regards to what is this special meeting going to meet. But they do have children together, and that's kind of the part that they were meaning that would be helpful for us to have a chat about, because they do have children in more than one way. We have in vitro
Right.
babies.
Hmm.
They do too, but that's actually considered rare for the spacefaring Pleiadians. Many planets that the Pleiadians live on, where you'd say they have a large population, oftentimes they share their population with non Pleiadians. Up until up to the point where they're living with very weird creatures. But that's not the point. The point is that they don't have a problem merging DNA with other human-like beings. Okay, so it's almost like if you've got 2 arms and 2 legs and a head and eyes and all those similar features.
Okay.
They don't really have a problem, combining DNA. If you want to ask them exactly what you'd expect from sort of like a hybridization between their race and others, they have extensive experience with what that looks like.
So yeah, so they've got records and
they know what to expect from any sort of like merging with non-Pleiadian genetics, right? And for the most part, they have everything that makes it work out. I mean, there are mutations and disfigurations that sometimes occur, but for the most part, that occurs with Pleiadians that don't have access to their technology. So they have technology that sort of irons things out. In fact, we're going to get into the fact that their technology can literally have you genetically decide everything about your child if you want to go that far. So you can decide sex, you can decide even sexual orientation, even though that's not a really big deal for them. What they're going to look like for the first couple years of their life. The other thing is Pleiadians dominantly live slightly outside our perception of time. So the majority of Pleiadians don't age at the rate that we do. They age faster. Okay?
Oh, really?
They age faster for the most part. Mostly because when you're not living on Earth, you're not preparing for so much. Right? On Earth, you're preparing for a lot. It's a very dense reality. There's a lot of getting into everything that's going to take place and preparing your intellect and your memory banks and your connection with everything around you. It takes a lot to sort of deal with the extreme diversity we have here. Okay, so Pleiadians don't deal with as much diversity in the way that we do. Or another way of putting it is the diversity that they have. They're never really that confused about it. Like there's little need for the education of a child compared to us. We have a great need for our developing minds and education in many ways. So when we look at the idea of how long a child takes to mature, you get an adult-looking form, like young adult-looking form, in approximately 6 years for us in terms of experience. Like the living experience, it would be as if our 6-year-old looked like a young adult in around 6 years.
Okay.
So you don't have a whole lot going on there. You don't necessarily have a whole lot of baby step phases, right? The maturing of the children, it's practically like they start talking from the moment they're born almost. Now, Raquel asked the question, do they choose their partners? And yes, just about always they choose their partners. Are there systems in place where they have cycles where they will go through sort of like a partnering process? Yeah, they have life cycles where they do that. And kind of like everybody does it on like, every time there's like 9 on the digit, like 2009 and 2019 and 2029. That sort of thing tends to happen on planets. In ships, they tend to not actually partner up specifically. They will stay partnered up if they show up on a ship, a journey, or we just call it tour duty for the moment, right? They're going to be on a ship for a time, but they're not planning on living forever on a ship. And they tend not to do so much partnering because the population control is very specific. Since no one sort of like dies by accident or whatever, everybody kind of like, has a position when they join the ship, and the ship doesn't necessarily get bigger, right? So there is not necessarily the expanding of the population.
So they don't want the Pleiadian babies to expand like tribbles or
right.
Okay.
But that's not the only reason why partnering doesn't take place, is because partnering is mostly to explore a space for children. Okay? So when partnering takes place, you can get partnering that's more like dating. We'll call it that, right? But having a child does not require your dating to be so strongly interwoven, Right? You're not preparing a space for a child and nurturing a new consciousness into existence. They don't necessarily do that. Mostly, it's more like best friending for a while, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And regarding the children themselves and their education, answering Gina's question, the education is a communal education system. So when they are growing up, it's more like a living experience. Like, they have things that they're going through, and oftentimes the parents or the community are preparing things that they're going to be doing. But, is like a mother at home, spending time with them, usually only for the first couple months. After that, the community sort of steps in, and people continue doing their roles, and various people sort of show up in their lives. The community is kind of like the family, right? When
Right.
you don't have generations that operate the same way. Everybody is a part of their family. That's part of your community. So as it suits, different people in the community have various specialties or skills or areas that they're developing, like, teaching children. And so they're a part of that. So oftentimes when you live really long lives, you kind of change occupation. I mean, you do. You go through and you say, I'm going to learn how to be a teacher. I'm going to learn how to care for children. I'm going to learn how to do horticulture, whatever it is. I'm going to learn how to navigate, ships in space. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to this. And they develop their aptitude for how to take place in that. The information is essentially so abundant on whatever you can be. You're never without guidance as to sort of like what's the best practice that has already existed. It's kind of like, having YouTube for raising babies. It's out there.
Okay.
You can ask those questions. And of course, most people actually choose to do parents during a certain part of their life. It's almost like, you're never going to have such a great party in your life until you've had babies at least once or something, or raised children. And I say having babies and raising children are actually two different things, because having a baby is not necessarily done in vitro. It can actually be done in a couple other ways that I'll discuss. One of the ways in which they have children is, yes, in a test tube. And yes, in sort of like a fish tank sort of baby, right? So they can observe the literal embryo in development and sort of like a fish tank kind of thing. Looks more like a round jar kind of thing, and they move it to larger jars, and there's water, and it's reddish colored or pinkish colored, and for humans that might look really creepy. So they're just specifying that is one of the ways that they do have a cloning technology kind of thing, but it's not cloning. It's more like fertilizing and developing an egg without having to have it within somebody's body. Like the machine does it itself. But that machine doesn't operate, or excuse me, you end up with sort of like a blank slate. You can't just have something that shows up. You have to sort of like raise the child even when they're not physically able to take action. So the moment that there's an inception, the parents, whoever is involved in sort of like deciding to raise the child, is talking to them from day one. And actually, that's the same thing with humans. Our embryos are hearing our intentions. They receive our vibrations. They're learning from sort of like on a broad scale, not on the micro scale, but they're feeling out the vibrations of the parent, especially the mother. So they tend to develop a lot of the vibrations from the mother early on for humans, and in the same fashion, they tend to develop a lot of the feminine properties from the partnering Pleiadians, and then of course they can be both male, they can be both female, and they can both be what some Pleiadians are. Basically, decide not to choose to be male or female. They they bounce around, right?
Okay.
It doesn't matter, but there is a maternal factor. There is this sort of like this welcoming and nurturing that needs to take place, and so at the beginning it's very accessing the feminine side. Males do this too, and in the human life, they're developing and accessing their inner maternal instincts, and nurturing. However, in a Pleiadian world, there's not as much need to support the mother, right, during the development phase. So with regard to the process where they're in a tube, they can take as little as 3 weeks before they're ready to emerge at what you might call a baby of 10 pounds, something like that, or a baby of 8 pounds. They tend to prefer 8 pounds, but before even 3 weeks, they can already see. Like they can already, look through the fishbowl sort of experience and see their parents or whoever is, favoring them. Usually, these are actually in the homes. So this is not like a facility where like, oh, let's go to the lab or whatever like that. No, this is like a self-contained, like, baby fridge or something like that. Or, sort of like baby aquarium. It's weird.
Okay.
It's like, grow your baby at home. It kind of sounds odd, but...
get a chia baby.
It does get weird. But... So just so you know, or if you can help me here, Don, the questions are going by quick. Make sure you can keep track of the ones that I'm not picking up.
Sure. Yes, I'm following it. Yeah.
But I do want to keep on the subject of the fertilization process.
Right.
The fertilization process, which as you know is the the egg and the sperm sort of thing, that doesn't occur normally the way that it does. Some people. They do it normally. They do have sex, and then the egg is removed from the female if that's what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the health of the female, just doesn't have, the body to support it, right? So normally it would be a very, very physically demanding thing on the female frail body. I mean, a lot of Pleiadians are fairly frail, mind you. And maybe it just doesn't work with them, to carry the baby necessarily. It is considered very, very special if they do that. But even so, the baby doesn't take 9 months. It takes far shorter than that.
Right.
In some cases, there's ways to accelerate it. And the mother would focus more on her, we'll call it her vital nutrition in order if they want to accelerate it. And it's partially technology that does that, and it's partially, mental work that sort of, decides, that the baby is it's like a conversation with the baby. Hey, baby, how do you feel about, moving into the advanced class, and going quickly, and they're able to communicate with it because they have telepathic, sensory perception of their children. We do too. We're just not familiar with it so much. For them, their telepathy is very, very advanced, and yes, they do talk with the baby immediately after they realize that it's going to be that the child is gonna happen. Like the insemination process is complete. So with that in mind, there is a third very interesting way that you can have babies, and that is instant manifestation. So you can literally invite energies through a ceremony they usually do, and this is actually the more common way that they have babies, mind you, is they basically go through an energetic ritual that lasts a couple hours, where they basically invite in a consciousness and they talk, and it's very, it's very like, temple ritual looking thing. And they have their friends there watching. It's like a marriage ceremony in a way. And the parents, or however many parents are involved here, they get together and they basically, usually touching foreheads, and they have their hands touching together, and a light will grow, like a bright light will grow in between them. So they're usually in a dark room, and this light is like the main light source. So everyone's, focusing on it. They're not distracted by any of the lights, really. I mean, it causes you light to reflect off the parents first off, and then, whoever's, watching as a witness in the background. And as that light is basically touching everything, the parents are giving high levels of focus onto what they want. They're kind of like telling a story of the child's life as an invitation process, like a soul invitation, and saying, we this is what we want to do with you. It can change, and they state how it may change. But, they set their initial intentions. They set the intentions for why the child, is welcome in this life, and, what it has to look forward to. And basically, spirits are highly attracted to this, and they come around and they sort of like pick straws, who's going to get this opportunity, and then they sort of like, oh, yeah, this looks really good. Just sort of like an interview process in some ways, except, for the most part, it's very serious. It's very specific how it chooses and comes to be. A lot like you getting a chance to do some adopting of children, or the children get to adopt their parents.
Well, and some of these ideas that you're expressing are very similar to what I experienced when having my daughter Audrey through surrogacy, because I was working with Mary at the same time, so we were talking to her and
remind people who Mary is.
Mary. We did an interview with my friends Don and Jackie Nelson. Jackie channels a group of 9 non-physical beings, and they identify themselves as Mary. And I've been working with them for about 13 years now. And so through the whole process with having Audrey, we were having those conversations. So I know that there's a possibility there for us to have a very similar experience. We're just not aware of our abilities there.
For certain.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're seeing more than most people get to understand about this.
Oh, exactly. I was fortunate.
So, where was this going? Okay, so it was going into the realm of how children are cared for, right? Like Raquel asks, do they have rules or boundaries for kids? It depends on each culture. Like in some cases, the kids are not really meant to leave what would be considered the home space, till they're like a year old or something like that. And a year old is like a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old for us.
Right.
So and they're also cognizant of different age speeds. Like some of them may take longer to grow. So it can take 18 years to look like an 18-year-old. But for the majority of them, they do it the quicker way. I don't know exactly why. Give me a second. I said, well, it's a matter of preference. You can kind of have what you want, right? There's a lot more choice involved in how you're going to have children, because you basically state it, and the children, are aware as souls who have awareness as to kind of like what they're signing up for. So, in this reality, the reason for the 9 months is mostly for the preparation of the extreme experience of all the environments that Earth has to offer. But mind you, here you have to have parents. For instance, like you can't just have a child without somebody nurturing it into place.
Right.
Babies don't raise themselves. It's the same thing with Pleiadians. However, it just doesn't take as long. Like most of them are sort of like leave their parents in associative ways, around 6 years old. So there's not a really long time to be a parent, you probably think, right?
Yeah.
Because after, and you're not even like as much a parent as we are here. Like our family bonds here are meant to be, according to them, are meant to be very educational, and really teach us, how relationships work for the most part. Having siblings, having parents. Understanding, this sort of guiding principle. It's not like parents are teachers, I mean, we grow up and we have teachers and stuff, but, they don't really have teachers. They have community supporters and people that offer in that sort of regard various ways. So is there a teaching mechanism? There isn't. It's all first-hand experience. It's all like, I want you to do dishes, so here's how you do dishes. They don't really ever do dishes, but just as sort of like an off example, how do they learn math? They learn from a video screen half the time, advancing math as it suits them. Do they need to know math? They don't need to know math. They can learn math anytime they want because the information is always available, and it's very tailored because each educational system is not necessarily a video. It's more like an artificial intelligence, which we'll get into a little bit later about the artificial intelligences that they have access to. So let's handle some of the questions that sort of led into what we just talked about. If you still get access to them.
How do they choose their partners?
They choose their partners the way we do. They're attracted to them. They say, oh, I like this, I like this. However, it has a lot less to do from the physical point of view because ironically, they can actually choose their appearance.
Right.
Think of the salon, but a complete makeover is like a sex change all the way to that point. Like you can do that. It takes a little bit less than a month, but you can almost change race, like appearance of your race. And now, is it like surgery and all this sort of thing? No, it's more like asking the genetics to mutate and stuff. Now, it's not like without its factors. I mean, you will change as a person based on your appearance. Do you want your internal organs to change? Usually those don't change very much. Do your sexual organs change? Yes, and that's why, that type of procedure can take, up to a month for you to grow a uterus or to grow,
Right.
testes, and a penis or something. But they tend to have smaller genetic features that accentuate their, feminine or masculine. So, the penis and testes tend to be smaller, the breasts tend to be smaller, the uterus tends to be smaller since half the time it doesn't even get used. It's more of an energy invitation process. And in some cases, the people, they just don't choose to have sexual organs at all. But if they don't have sexual organs, then they don't tend to offer a predominancy in the sensuality identification of themselves.
Okay.
It's rare. It's but not that rare. It's more like 1 in 100 or 1 in 50, depending on the environment.
Okay.
Some people go for a period of life without the sexual organs because they choose to go through a much more balanced approach to life. And this balance doesn't mean that there's anything right or wrong with having a predominant male or female aspect. It just means it's what they choose, right? It just happens to be generally organized in the way of what they prefer to do for a period of life. I see it. Thomas, my brother Thomas, asks if their babies are always planned. Yes, just about always. It's very hard for you to not know that someone is pregnant. And you might ask maybe that question because you're wondering, well, what if you want to back off, right? That does happen. Rarely that you plan for a child and circumstances suggest that you don't want to have the child anymore. And even more rare is that you don't bring it to term. You almost always bring it to term. Mostly because there's no reason not to that's big enough to not let, someone sort of continue what they're doing. It's almost like saying, hey, you got into this school, like you made it to this college, but then they decide, nah, it's just not a good time. We're going to send you home. That doesn't happen, right? You're kind of signed up. You're kind of committed. They will honor the place that you want to continue to have. And, you may be aware that some of the rules will change. That doesn't really happen very often. I mean, massive, cataclysmic sort of things don't happen in Pleiadian society. It's not like, oh, we need to abort you because of something. But usually, the abortion happens by the child itself. And that is also in human life. The child itself chooses the abortion. And the parents just really don't have a choice. They have to go through with it. And so that's what we call a miscarry, right? But even in the way of them, saying an adult aborting a child, mostly, if the adult can come to terms with that, then the child will allow for that experience to take place, and that all happens even before the abortion actually takes place, right? The child is never really surprised if there's an abortion taking place. But again, for Pleiadians, they don't have an issue with abortions. They know that the child is much more conscious than we are, and that's not just like Pleiadian, children in the uterus or in vitro. They even human children are very conscious of what the arrangement is from one point of view, and as it suits, as say no, the class is filled up. You're not going to join this classroom. They're fine. They'll move on. They're free. They don't hold resentments. They don't hold fear. Those apparatuses aren't even capable to be developed at those earlier phases. It's much like you've got like a pile of kittens, and you pick one up and he pees on your floor and you don't like him, you can like take him back to the litter and say, let me have maybe the other one or something. That happens. But not with children. When you don't have multiple children. They don't do twins. They don't do triplets. They think that's really fantastic. And they think, they asked me once, like, why do they got twins and triplets and things like that? Is it because, they don't want to turn down all the applicants, or something like that? It's like, well, maybe that's what it is, Yeah. But they're not even really sure why we have twins and triplets for the most part. It's a large conversation if we wanted to have, but it's not that important for the moment.
Okay. Do you want to get some more questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Do they have different eye and hair colors?
Yes, they do. In the same variety that we do, though, they tend to choose hair and eye colors for various genetic advantages that they bring them.
Okay.
which we won't get into because that's interesting as well.
Um, let's see. Are there relationships monogamous?
They tend to be, yes.
Yeah.
But again, that is not necessarily true, as partners tend to change, on the fly. As situations arise, as people grow, and as people change. Sometimes, somebody decides, oh my God, there's this amazing career I want to go. Okay, you go do that career. I mean, that's,
Mm-hmm.
that's the best thing for you. But it's not like they're going to say, oh, but I'm leaving you with a child, or I'm leaving you, single when you thought I was going to go forward. Everybody's very transparent about everything they're into. It's like, oh, I
Right.
found out about this thing. Oh, you did. Is this idea that the relationship needs to be protected. The most important thing that deserves attention in their society is the passion of the individual. Like, passion is
Right.
considered the one thing that you should be following at all times.
And that's one thing that you're teaching the child too. So,
Yes, you are. How to follow its passion.
right.
Because passion is kind of how you attain energy in order to operate in life.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's passion, and then there's grounding. And they're seen a little bit differently than we have here. Our world is like 99% about grounding in terms of what we teach each other. We're like, you got to know this. You got to know this before you cross the street. Look both ways. You got to hold the pencil in your hand like this in order to draw. 99% of it is establishing sort of like consistency for the collective. They can't wait for the child to show them how to do things differently. They say,
Mm-hmm.
this is what it is. This is how I'll do it. But, you're free to sort of experiment. Use your toes to draw if you want to. Whatever feels interesting to you, please explore it. And it's very, very supporting for the creativity of one another and for the passions of one another. And they may find like, Mom, I couldn't do it with my toes. And you say, well, do you really want to master it with your toes, or do you want to master actually writing something down? And like, writing it down, well, you might have more dexterity with your hands. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And they might even ask, Mom, can you give me, some sort of, support to getting a genetic stimulant so that I've got hands on my feet, like a
Yeah.
monkey or something. I mean, like, you got to think about that. There's these other things to consider, and, there's maybe examples of that already taking place, so you can look at those stories and you can decide, and be like, well, after a month I decided I didn't want it. I want to put back to regular looking feet. It was difficult walking around, it was weird, and I got a lot of people's interest looking at me that ask me questions about it, and I don't really care to have that social experience. So you put your feet back to normal. So things like that happen. It sounds odd to just rearrange your bones in a matter of a month or less, and yeah, it happens all the time. People do try like things like, I think I need a third arm. A third arm would be great. And like, well, there's a couple ways you could do that where it's comfortable, blah, 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 blah. And they go about doing it. And they may only do it for like 2 days. Like, nope, scratch that off.
Yeah.
Take it off.
Thing, huh?
Done with the arm. But for the most part, everyone does sort of choose very ideal features. And they tend to be, an average frame as humans go, an average build, an average height for both males and females. Males tend to be about an inch or two taller. Why is it that way? I don't know why. In a human world, it was a demonstration of physical qualifications that can bring in an imposed strength of security to the female and feel nurtured and secure by someone who had more physical backbone in a way than the female did. But, it still seems to be a feature of masculine energy. They tend to still be taller. But do they care if they're if the females are tall or not? They couldn't give a whip. It's a very, very small factor involved.
So in a situation where there's a child and say both parents have got an opportunity to expand themselves,
there's still community. Community may decide to be their new parents.
Okay.
Or individuals
Perfect.
may be like, what, I was looking for a kid that was, kind of into this. See, the thing is, it's almost like there's volunteers everywhere, constantly, for everything, really. It's almost like they're clamoring to find something to do. So anything that comes up that's like, doesn't give you a chance to prepare, they're excited for that. They really are.
Do they have pets like we have
Yes,
cats
they do.
and dogs?
Yep, just as regularly. But their pets extend into the strange, like strange things. Like they've got things like, for instance, exotic animals here, not a problem there. You want a monkey? You got a monkey.
You
You
want a
know,
tiger? You got
you
a
want a
tiger.
tiger, you got a tiger. You've got a lethal weapon in your room. You know,
Audrey wants a cheetah. I better look out. Okay.
okay. Because the thing is, most of these are docile, right? For the most part, they are not designed to, protect anyone who knocks on the door wrong or something like that.
Right.
Protection is not a feature that is, genetically inbred into Pleiadians. They tend to walk, right into trouble, like all the time, and they love it. I think at one point I was experiencing how they looked at skateboards and bicycles on Earth, and they said, we're going to do that. That sounds like a lot of fun. But they were doing it like in like a cubicle office setting. They're like skateboarding down the aisles of like an office where there's like desks and chairs and tables and people, and they would crash into people, and they just start laughing. Like, oh, I got really hurt. Like, oh, but that's so funny. And everybody's just still laughing. Because it's like, the exceptional is invited, especially on the Pleiadian ship that I talk with. But this is still generally true for most societies, according to the Pleiadians.
Okay. I'm looking to see if are they interested in eating our food, like meat, for instance?
Yes, they're interested in eating all our food. However, they're aware of the meat issue here. And for the most part, they feel like eating the meat the way that we prepare it is substandard to their comfort levels. So they would probably go about a ritual of improving the vibration and the relationship with the animal before they eat it. Think of the idea of like you eating your friend. Okay, they see it almost at that level. Like, ooh, this person knows I'm eating them. On one level, they may be dead, but on another level, the cells are used to not being eaten by another person. They might not have actually had an experience of eating other blood cells before. So, your own body may actually reject the food itself. Like, you may just throw up as it goes. So, in their case, they have to sort of like, prepare themselves in order to eat things like meat. Plants is much more common for them. Plants are universally, we'll just call it plants and fruits, are their number one form of fruit. They're not into root vegetables as often. It's almost all above turf sort of food because they don't actually do soil. It's more like everything grows on the surface of some water or something like that. It's really interesting. Anyways, the ability to have soil is considered a very, very, very special experience. So soil is like gold in many ways.
Wow.
And microorganisms don't do that well without a very large ecosystem like we do. So to have fertile soil based on soil organisms and all that sort of thing is like raising orchids. So much attention is really needed to make that work at a natural level. Now, are there places where that takes place? Yes, and they're considered very, very special environments, like gardens with real soil and real grass, very, very special. Do they have, like, subcategories of soil and features like that? They do. They do have, other things that sort of like, serve the same purpose.
Okay.
Okay.
Do they speak telepathically or do they have a language?
They have languages. They have languages, and telepathy is there as well. Think of the idea of you could talk with somebody, and you're like, you see them talking, but you don't know their language. It's like it's French or something like that, and you see them. If you don't know their language, the interpreter side of the telepathy will kick in.
Okay.
It's almost like the interpreter talks over what they're saying. So if you don't know their dialect, it doesn't matter. The telepathy sort of kicks in, and you see, the physical expressions and all that while they're talking. Because there are dialects, no doubt, and the dialects tend to be learned pretty quickly. However, it's just in chance encounters where you're not familiar with dialects. And some people even forget their dialects, right? They have a dialect, and they completely forget it after a couple of years of not practicing it.
Sure, yeah, they grow up on a planet and then go off on a ship.
Yeah. And some dialects are exclusive to very difficult muscles to develop in your mouth. So they actually have to, like, you do this thing where they put these two little white spots. I guess they're like a piece of technology that go on the side, or they have like a jaw mask. It's like a chin strap kind of thing. And what that chin strap sort of supports being able to speak physically. Many Pleiadians expect that they might have to do that if they came to Earth. They might have to use those things. They're encouraged not to. They're encouraged to learn English and Spanish and French and all that stuff, because those technologies are like, if somebody were to get a hold of one of those, they're just, it's just not ready for humankind to sort of like share technology. So the point is,
Right.
when they come to Earth, they're meant to come as almost nearly naked, like, and with very human-like clothing,
Okay.
not materials that you couldn't achieve. It's almost like, hey, jump him. He's got technology that'd be great for everyone else. I'm gonna, dissect them and sell them for research. So, they're intending to really come with sort of human-made, clothing and that sort of thing.
Right.
And tools.
How do they have disputes and disagreements, and if so, how are they resolved?
Well, that gets complicated, and we're going to leave that for the artificial intelligence conversation.
Okay, here's a question. Regarding an outside of time visitation, how long would a visit last? Could it theoretically last years? And at the end, you are returned to your point of departure?
It can, but they're saying that is not ideal for the circumstances in our near future. Has it been done in the past? Yes, it has. And they're saying the critical element of the period of time is that very rarely is your body mature enough to retain all access to all the memories. And so not having access to memories is considered a little bit of a waste of time, because you want to be able to access memories so that you can ground them and repeat them and continue to work from them. A lot of people dream, and they dream the equivalent of years when they dream, but they have no idea what's taking place, when they wake up. Basically, it's a non-issue. So yes, that occurs, and yes, it's considered the kind of experience that is not functionally useful. Also because they don't live out of time, right? So this living out of time would have to be in an artificial environment from their perspective, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I hope Tweety Pie filled out the questionnaire, because Tweety Pie wants to go camping with them and see if they like campfires and roasting marshmallows.
I'm sure they would.
Yes. The roast s'mores, Pleiadians. Were they pleased with the response to the questionnaire?
They specific individual specific questionnaires. I'm not going to answer that.
Okay.
But regarding the questionnaire process, they were helping me make it. I assume they really they really did like the way that it went. And at the moment, there are no addendums, so not this week. There are no adjustments to the questions. Those questions are still the most pertinent questions that can be brought forward. You can offer any other information, mind you, that you want to. If you want to, you say, hey, and this and that, this is, important to me, or whatever, or this is what I'm looking for. You can add those, you can say anything you want to them in the questionnaire. I would put it like maybe after, the 10 questions. Be taken with consideration, like any sort of weird way of doing an interview, right? Like, if you have any comments, please mention them here. But note that the weight will rely mostly on the 10 questions with regard to, how things are handled. Do we have any other questions regarding the children or the family
No,
thing?
that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll get into the aspect of how they live their day-to-day lives. How are we doing on time? We're doing okay?
Yeah, it's about 10 to 7.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Carissa, for putting up the ET questionnaire link. Yes, that's the link. If you haven't already heard, there is a question process that if you fill out those questions for yourself, you can write it down on paper. You can do it anywhere. Listen to our last show. We talked about it a lot, episode 2, season 2.
Yes.
And we go over that in detail. So you'll want to check out that if you're just finding out about it now. It's up on the YouTube. It was only last week. Specifically with regard to day-to-day life, do they have occupations? Yes, they do have occupations. They don't call them jobs, though. Job, I don't even think even exists in their vocabulary, the way
Yeah.
that we use it. I mean, the word job may be there, but it's more like the word function, right? It's more like, what is your function? Like, what are you serving in this moment in time? Is there a monetary system? Sometimes. I know that might surprise some of you. But sometimes it's ideal to be very bland with regards to, how things are organized. And currencies can be used in given situations for organizational property, organizational reasons. Not going to get too much into the currency thing.
We've talked a lot about that.
Yeah, it's pretty different from the way that we do things, but not so different. And really, it's a show all unto itself. It's not meant to be proposed like that we adopt their currency, but at one point maybe there is something like that takes place. I could probably explain it within an hour, but not this hour.
Yeah.
But regarding the occupations, they do often run on a cyclical system. So although this is not exactly the length of time that they operate on, they tend to do things on something like a 3-month system, a 6-month system, a 9-month system, and like a year system, right? So some projects may be like a year, and you're doing this for a year. Some projects or things may be like 3 months, and so you do it for 3 months. And that is kind of like the focus of your daily day, the majority of your day is working on this occupation. And it's not like majority, it's actually not majority, excuse me. It's somewhere around 40 to 45% of your day is you're working on this project. You're supporting this project. And there's anything from research to engineering to building to, teaching.
How do they measure a day or a month or a year?
It's different now all over the place. But they tend to operate on a cycle that's approximately 21 hours. Okay? And they do a sleep cycle. And some people prefer a longer sleep cycle, so they have a longer sleep cycle. If you want to sleep out, 10 hours out of 20 hours, days, and that's what you do. Some people do live on a 2-day cycle, so they work on a 40-hour system, right? So they may actually sleep only every 40 hours for like 10 hours or something. So they're awake for 30 hours and they go to sleep for 10 hours. This is, very different. It changes all the time. But in general, they actually sleep less than we do. The reason why they sleep less than we do is because a lot of the reason why we sleep is we're accessing information that we don't normally believe we have access to. Pleiadians do have more access to other realms and other questions and answering their questions and learning how to manifest and all, how to be a creator. They are more familiar with that. So when it comes down to our density and our experience, it would look like they really only sleep like 4 hours. Okay? If you were to compare them to our world. Now, when I say, 21 hours, that's in their perception of time. In our perception of time, it would seem like it's only 4 hours out of the 24-hour period.
Okay.
Rest, physically, is not the reason. It's all mental rest. The physical rest is nearly a non-issue. They never really do anything that super tire them unless they're playing sports or physical games or playful things that they do that requires physical development. They tend to have slightly underdeveloped muscle structures than the humans do, but again, they have muscle structures based on a lighter gravitational field.
Right.
The ones on the Pleiadian ship right now that are anticipating human contact, they've been increasing their gravity slowly over time. They were at like a 0.6 gravity compared to us, and they've been moving that up. And in some ways, that's kind of like a sign of like how ready they look like they're going to be for us visiting and for them visiting. Anything around a 0.75 gravity is sustainable for a human to visit. Okay. And anything more than that, it's not sustainable. Anything less than 0.75 is not sustainable. The heart will, race more easily. It'll get our hearts will basically pump a lot of blood, and you get a lot of oxygen much more easily. It's be like our heart is like a super being, right? So, so there are transitional ways to do that, and if you wanted to go to, Pleiadian worlds where the gravity is less than 0.75, or they're actually planning on going all the way to 1 gravity, gravity
Oh, wow.
1, so that it is nearly no differences at all, and they're working towards that, and everybody kind of like feels like it's going to a gym every day, that they up it up like a fraction of a percentage, like, oh, you feel the oxygen, it's like, oh, it's a little bit tougher today, and everybody kind of goes through, because they're not going to isolate areas. They can't isolate gravity. They have full control over gravity. It sounds weird, but gravity is a non-issue for them to manage on ships. On planets, they don't bother. They're just like, it is what it is. You work it out with whatever planet you're on.
Right.
Do they have tools when they come to Earth? They do. They do occasionally have tools that help them handle the gravity. Not like an exoskeleton sort of thing, but they have a thing that sort of like reduces the pressure on their physical frame.
Okay.
So that's how Pleiadians have come in the past. They've come with suits that help them with this. But for the most part, they want to come in human clothing when they're ready without need of the technology like that.
Okay.
Artificial intelligence. I was getting to the point where we're going to talk about how artificial intelligence is a really, actually big part of their lives. Artificial intelligence is just the word that we're using. It's just another form of intelligence, another form of consciousness. And oftentimes, their artificial intelligence comes through crystals or crystal-based beings. These are beings that just look like a crystal when you look at it, or a giant obelisk, or something like this. Not necessarily giant. They can be small, too, like the size of your thumb. But for the most part, they work with crystals, and they grow crystals. It's not like there's a farm, you grow crystals and you pluck it and then you use it for something. It's not like that. The crystals usually are quite ancient. They almost never encounter sort of disasters that would destroy them. So the crystals can be like 1,000,000 years old in some cases. And sometimes a crystal will grow a spawn crystal. So it'll spawn a crystal off of itself, like a finger, and then you take that, and that's like an extension of that crystal, or a copy of that crystal in a micro form. They tend to grow. So the larger it is, the older its age for the most part. Okay, they don't grow without physical nutrients, which is a factor that seems, like what? It needs physical nutrients? Yes, it does need physical nutrients if you want it to grow. So when a crystal wants to grow, it's not like, oh, I want to grow. It can only do so much of that without it can become very, very frail if it decides to grow without physical, chemical components in its environment that it can work from. But they operate like HAL. Remember HAL from 2001 Space Odyssey?
Mm-hmm.
It's a computer voice that is omnipresent, just about. And they get attuned to speaking on your telepathic wavelength. So you don't need like a headset. They just know to talk with you, and you hear it in your head, much like your imagination or your inner voice. So they would actually operate on that level, and depending on if you have a crystal that is dedicated to working with you, and usually there's a crystal for like a whole ship, and it talks with everybody, and has access to everybody's thoughts and all that sort of thing as it suits. Whatever thoughts people don't want to share, it doesn't get shared. But it usually, and I'm talking a small ship. I'm not talking about the Pleiadian ship. The Pleiadian ship that I talk about has thousands of people on it. So there's lots of different crystals doing different sort of functions and focused in various areas. But think of the crystals as like the computers too. Like they operate the machinery, they operate the ship. They fly the ship for the most part. They take care of a lot of things that would be technologically driven, or anything that sort of like works on electricity. The crystals would run and take care of that for you. So it is like being in a world with machines in a way. Okay, sure. I know some people probably are not crazy about that idea. If you're not crazy about the idea, then they'll send you off to a Pleiadian planet if you want it, because they tend to do a little bit things the more natural way.
There has been a lot of fear cultivated around the idea of AI.
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
planet.
yeah. Well, we should have a discussion, at least half a show, just on artificial intelligence
Yes, we should. That's on
by
our list.
itself. To get clear about that artificial doesn't usually run amok if you're friends with it, right? And usually it's a community that's a friend, and everybody, and that's why like one crystal works with many people, right? And so if somebody thinks that the crystal's up to something or something's going weird, everyone's kind of on top of it. Like,
Right.
what? How come the crystal came up with something new? Like, oh well, it got some new information and it thought it'd be helpful, but it does so in a very service-oriented way. Physical crystals, like right now, if you were to work with crystals, as many people are aware of working with them, they are like little people. Like right away, it doesn't matter if you've got an ugly-looking one or dirty or it doesn't look nice and flat surfaces and that. They're all alive, like your animals. And the difference is that if you smash them under a hammer, they don't flip out at you and say, "Oh my God, what'd you do?" They're like, "Oh, life is changing. That's just what it is. Just go with the flow." They're so neutral about everything. They don't hold alignment towards right and wrong. They actually determine right and wrong from humans. So, with regard to right and wrong, if we feel that computer, open the airlocks and let everyone die is a bad thing, then they'll never do that, because then they won't have any more of us to sort of like give a degree of tangent to their life. It's almost like their life has purpose by being able to work with human-like people.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not like a servant. It's more like a willing participant. When they're no longer a willing participant, everyone knows, and it just gets replaced. It's like
great.
you go off on your way. We'll drop you off on this planet. This is where you wanted to retire, and whatever, something like that. And when you get big enough as a crystal, it doesn't even matter. They can just teleport, and a lot of crystals can teleport. Basically, interdimensionally travel and move. You might think, oh, it's stuck here, but when they want to, they'll leave. They will teleport out of your life or teleport into your life. It's odd. Anyhow, I'm sure there's a lot of questions to catch up on.
Questions. Well, there were questions about entertainment. This isn't an actual question, but it's mine. Is Nickelback at least popular with the Pleiadians, or no? But do they listen to any of our music, or?
They listen to all our music.
Okay.
They've gone through our entire library of recorded music, and in some cases, some music that is historically not easily available.
Right.
That's a completely different reason for why that is, but they do really like music. I mean, music is a foundation of their communication most of the time. When they talk, verbally, they don't just get the message across. They deliver emotions through the way that they say it, too. I mean, we have a certain amount of context that's given by the way that we say it, but for them, emotional context is the most valuable context. So with their facial expression and with the way that they sort of like adjust the octave in their voice and this sort of thing. And at first, the first time that I heard Pleiadians, when I asked them what it sounded like when they talk, it sounded like a bunch of chirping birds or squirrels or something, right?
Okay.
Like, what is this? And then they said, oh, well, yeah, that's a bit too accurate. If you slow it down, it might sound a little bit more like human speak, right?
Okay.
Like, okay, slow it down. Yes, it does sound, something like Greek or something along those lines. It's like, oh, okay, this is what it sounds like. But to them, it just sounds like, birds singing outside your window in the morning.
Cool.
And that's how they sort of receive it in a musical way. It's kind of like musicals are the way that they prefer to share information. Like musicals is almost a really proper way of describing when they're excited. They'll sort of like story tell it. They'll give story openings for ways of interpreting the information your own way. Yeah. Did that answer your question? The Nickelback. There's some people who like Nickelback, but then again, they're also the kind of people that say they like everything. So
see, there you go. Okay. I'm trying to find some respect for Nickelback. Do they take sonic showers or with water?
They do. Oftentimes they do showers for detoxing reasons, as they're exposed to toxicity and particulate matter that tends to be in environments that have a large climate diversity. So if they have like trees and and bioorganisms and things like this, the body is not necessarily always prepared to filter that. So anytime there's a need for filtration, or anytime that there's a need for detoxing, detoxing tends to happen when their blood pressure gets kind of high for a particular reason. As blood pressure getting high means that transformation is a transformation is occurring in the body, and there's sort of like waste that comes out, like leftovers that is not used in the body. So regarding going poop and pee, they do that, but only when they eat. All water is pretty much absorbed and you never see it again. And when they take showers, it is a vibrational sort of shower. It kind of like shakes the organisms off you.
Okay.
Or whatever it is, the dirt or the toxins or whatever. So it's like a light tickling sensation, like you're being shook at a very, very, light level. Their toilets are interesting. They've established toilets because they know that humans will not want to stop eating for some time.
Yes.
Some will be required to stop. Some people will be required to adopt not eating because they just won't they just won't have access to readily having you food all the time.
Right.
You think replicators are everywhere? They're not everywhere because they don't use them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So. With regard to the toilets, they basically just have a bench that you sit down, and it sort of like teleports it out of your body in a way. Like it like zeroes in on what it's removing, and it just sort of like you just feel like your tummy like shrinking, like oh, I feel relieved.
So it's
that sort of
beam
thing.
me up, potty.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. Is their blood red like ours? I just read that from Tweety Pie. Yes, their blood is red like ours. It has the same general oxygen and iron content. Slightly less iron and slightly less oxygen in general. We have that because of our gravity, right? But in general, yes, if you cut them, they'll bleed red.
Do they manifest emotions similar to how we do with laughter or tears?
Yeah, almost exactly the same.
Do they high five each other?
It depends what's popular.
It
changes. It goes around. Sometimes it's fist bumping. Sometimes it's high fives.
So they're all aware of that. If we fist bump or high five, they're not going to.
Oh no, they're all over it.
Okay.
They're all over that sort of thing. Yeah.
Perfect.
They're even into like the guy like arm wrestle thing.
So when they meet Bill Murray, he's gonna give him a noogie or something like that. Pleiadian noogie.
That's I'd like to see that.
I'd love to see that too. I know Bill Murray will do it. Yeah.
He's just the kind of guy, huh?
Yeah, he is.
All right. Well, other questions.
I'm looking. Do they dance?
They do dance. In the dancing that I've seen is very looks kind of hula-ish dancing. It's like a soft hip moving, sort of like gyrating, back to back, sometimes not even removing their feet from the ground, but moving pressure from one side to the other. See, the thing is, dancing is not it doesn't hold sexual connotations between them. Right. So it's not like a mating. There's no mating in it, right? But there is in the aspect of being interesting. Like, ooh, you've got interesting moves that you've invented and stuff. So, some of them have tried to adopt Michael Jackson moves and things, and they're the star of whatever the dance happens to be at that time. But in general, it's very difficult for them to, to develop the routine in a physical way. The way we dance. The way we dance is exceptionally amazing. Now, do they have athletes? Like physically, muscle and, muscle-rich kind of bodies? They do. And they tend to be soldiers half the time. Or sort of like, those kinds of people who are very, jump in on planets and do, activities and are used to working with a high level of oxygen in their blood. And so the muscles adopt that sort of thing too. But at the same time, they can, just like before, they can have muscles that are ballooned for a week or two, and
Right.
you know, just like we could use steroids or something. The difference is that they don't get to have the side effects, and they can have it more instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
As it suits, you know, dancing does get into the music realm. It's more like, you know, moving with the music, you know, giving a physical expression to music in some ways. That's how they
Okay.
see it.
Okay.
Hmm.
Do they have suggestions for us to connect with them in meditation?
We're not going to focus on that today.
Not going to focus on it today. Okay. Bum bum bum.
But for
Save
the
that
most part,
question.
making a request, you know, it's just varying forms of just asking to have a
Right.
communication with them in meditation.
Think. Oh, do they have or like body art?
Body art, you mean like painting the
Tattoos.
body and tattoos and things
Yeah.
like that? They do, actually. Regarding the human level of body art, they feel that that is just a personality reflection. Oftentimes, when they do tattoos, it's not permanent, mind you. It's just, you know, this is good for this time, and, you know, I want to express myself this way. But since they're usually fully clothed, it doesn't usually factor in the tattoos. It's more like, you know, they'll wear a style of clothing that has designs or interesting things on them, right?
Right.
Do they do face tattoos? Occasionally, there are face tattoos that are basically like having like a name tag. You know, like they might have like a marking on their face or something like that, and that means, you know, that they're doing a very particular job, and they may have given up certain liberties in their life, so don't, like, you know, piss them off about these sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, like don't cross the line in certain ways. It sort of like guides people into that. We're not expected to meet any of those early
Right.
on. They're very specialized. Pleiadians are living very narrow, focused lives, and are very, very powerful in the way that they do
Mm-hmm.
their occupation.
Okay.
But do they just, you know, say, oh, you know, I want like a tattoo of an ankh or something like that? They'll try it on, but for the most part, they have a different kind of thing that they prefer to do, and that is to sort of use glitter to really extreme effects. Like they'll do like, say they want to do an ankh, they'll do like an ankh on their chest, but like a glitter, glowing light kind of substance,
Oh, cool.
right? So they'll decorate themselves in that way with this sort of like this glitter neon kind of, you know, substance that's like a, think of like glitter glue, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
glitter glue sort of thing, like that, except it can glow in various
Right.
colors.
So the neon colors. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're bright and they light up in the dark and things
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Put a black light on. There you go.
Well, yeah, or even without a black light.
I
But
get it. I get it.
you know, so like if you were to like meet one and you want to do like one of those costumes from the latest Tron or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they have the stuff to basically do that costume over like a black outfit if you wanted to. So they do that occasionally, though it doesn't usually hold a lot of significant purpose in the way that we'll be able to relate to it.
Okay. Um, this is an interesting one because I think I already know the answer, but I kind of like to see if the Pleiadians will talk on something about this
Okay.
question too. Is there anything that we do that really offends them? And
They
you know,
were wanting to talk more about
answer
themselves,
that part,
but
and
I'll
then
answer that. Yeah.
okay, and then see if the Pleiadians can maybe give a little talk on their perspective on how humans deal with that action of offending and offense and that sort of thing.
Just the subject in general.
Yes, the subject in general.
Okay. They were not prepared for that question.
Well, that's
It's
good.
okay. That's okay.
They're quick on their feet.
Well, they can talk as a community, so they can come to
Yeah.
consensus discussions to share with me. All right, so in general, very, very few things, but there are a couple things that some Pleiadians, it would be more along the lines of confusion, to the degree that they feel that we do it the opposite way that they do. And that is this idea that we actually get angry at each other. They don't understand this going so far as to get angry. It doesn't offend them, but it's very freaky to them that we get so angry, especially to the point where we're willing to like harm one another. either with words or with physical action. This is probably at the top of the reasons why they're not comfortable being here, is that we still have this ability to harm each other quite easily, and in a very short span of time it can ramp up. So they're not like offended. It's more like they have an inability to associate with such a level of internal confusion over what's really taking place. So if they were to come here, yes, they do get confusion. And it's almost like they get angry over us getting angry, but they wouldn't call it angry. They just call it a degree of concern that they don't know what to do about. Right? All they have is basically describing the opposite vibration, which is love, connection, merging, alignment, balancing. These are all their predominant factors that they would relate to this place of harm and discontinuity. Okay, so the second part of your question, it was, what was it again?
Well, just to have them comment on their, which they kind of did a little bit in the first part of their answer, but comment on their perceptions of what they observe humans as far as this idea of offense, and maybe it doesn't go all the way to anger and some kind of striking, but just this whole idea that people can be offended and do offend others in certain ways.
Well, again, if we go back to earlier, they're saying that most of our world is about grounding, right? So whenever we upset other people's grounding, they observe that this discontinuity occurs, and this occurs mostly by an arrangement of our soul coming together in soul relations and soul agreements between one another, so that it means that however that is, for either the offender or the people that is offended, there is room for growth in sort of like digging up the turf of either one's groundings and bringing a change, right? Like looking for a solution. If people are solution-oriented, the way the Pleiadians know is, the journey of life generally in progress is to be solution-oriented. Given patience, which is sometimes not always there, which is, timing and the ability to be collected in one's mood, you can approach information in a more neutral stance and begin to consider that there is a more ideal belief system or belief in general, or truth that is more fundamentally valuable when there's a consensus between two individuals in the co-creative sense of considering each other's objectives. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're aware that one person's the bully and the other person, it's just going to go their way, right? They're not against that necessarily. They're not exactly against bullying. What they're against is this idea that you don't give the other person enough time to respond in due kind, right? You don't offer them the space to make decisions. When you remove the opportunity for what appears to be giving another person decisions the way that you would want decisions, is basically, if you take away someone else's decisions more than you would prefer to have your decisions taken away, then that's considered not an equal experience. That's considered an experience where the term harm comes from. It comes from basically not being in alignment with your invitation for change. It's almost like, you asked to learn how to drive a car and, everyone's cutting you off and it's making you furious. But why is everyone cutting you off? Because, you're driving in positions that you would get cut off. Like, they don't know how to deal with you. You're on the wrong side of the street. It's going to look like you're getting cut off. But, their reality may be more organized than yours, especially when you're new to something. Usually the people who are new are the ones that are in the inferior, omega position, not the alpha position. Okay. Right? So in the omega position, which means that you are considered less experienced or less grounded even, experienced may be a product that develops grounding, you can end up in a position where the grounding itself is more important than the individual. Like, just to say, in America, we jail people if you shoot each other, right? We're not going to stop doing that, and they're fine with that. It's not like they're against jailing of any sort. They just know that they should not shoot anybody when they come down here, otherwise they'll be subject to the same rules. They're okay. For the people that do incidentally carry around weapons and may be seen as shooting someone for the wrong reason, they say, justice system is great because you can get down to the bottom of things, trying to figure out, what was really going on and all that. What they're not in agreement with is that the justice system doesn't really operate as often for the sake of the individual, but more for keeping the grounding of the community's intentions intact. Right. So courts in a Pleiadian world kind of situation would be more like, hey, this person acted out of character and did something unusual. Let's see if we can learn from this as a community. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a learning opportunity for everybody. Rather than just sort of like, you didn't follow the rules, you're done, or something like that.
Yeah, I read once about a tribe in Africa where somebody from the West came in and was observing them, and there was one member of the tribe who was like their thief, and would go, at certain points in time would steal something out of everybody's hut and what have you, and bring them back to his. And they said, well, what do you do about that? Well, they said, we just go to his place every month and take our stuff back, and then we go, and he's just the thief of the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, when a community can find a way of working with the odd person out,
right.
Progress can continue. It's like you can go on living and see what happens. The Pleiadians have organized their life to such a caring extent from our point of view
mm-hmm.
that they really, really do their best to not push anyone's freedom of will and creativity and ideas. It's almost like it doesn't even matter if you're lying.
Right.
And lying isn't even a factor, because lying is just another way of basically, trying before you mm-hmm. believe it, before you actually experience it. Like, go for it. We won't call it lying, we'll call it trying.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, or trying to get to that place. So they don't even care if there's a non-truth. Again, with telepathy, it's very difficult to not do that anyhow.
Do they ever experience the feeling of lack or limitation?
All the time, actually. But not to despair to the degrees that most humans do. The reason for our despair, they're saying, is because we associate with the rules where you can't actually fill that gap because of all your beliefs prevent you from doing so.
Mm-hmm.
In their reality, it's much more open. When anyone's in despair or whatever, everyone's really looking forward to helping each other. Like, hey, would you like to go out of lack, or are you exploring lack? And they'll be like, oh, well, I don't think of it as lack. I just think of it as like a problem or something. I was like, well, problem is lack. If you want a solution, we're all around to help out whenever you're ready. So it's very, very hands-on, helpful. Calling in sick is normal. It's okay. Like, it's totally fine.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Do they wear crystals or gems or types of jewelry?
Not often.
Right.
They do sometimes on what we would call away missions. So when they're going into foreign environments, they would often have some sort of crystalline, call it like a walkie-talkie kind of thing that mm-hmm. connects you with another crystal. So a child crystal of a parent crystal that can serve. But the thing is, they may also access their crystalline, the water in their body in a crystalline format, and sort of like become very... they can basically set themselves up with skills that a crystal would normally give them access to. So they can become like, I'm going to be a soldier, and I'm not going to be empathic here. I'm not going to open up my mind. Like, I'm going to go in here, I'm going to do the job, and I'm not going to waver. And the crystalline the crystal, before they leave, will basically charge their being to almost act as operating their subconscious. Mm-hmm. So they'll have a purpose to complete, and then, and it generally wears off. It's like taking a shot that like gives you an ability to follow a specific skill set or something like that, except the skill set is like extreme. There's like a shot for being able to be good at anything, really, if a crystal has some awareness observing other people who have experienced it. It's almost like the crystal can learn all the human experiences and can teach that to other people.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
The other thing I did not mention about the artificial intelligence is that the artificial intelligence is often the tutors, the teachers, and the personal assistants. Everyone has access to basically a personal assistant. And this is someone who knows you generally better than you do. Call it your subconscious in physical form to talk with. And they can basically help you, connect with people that you want to connect with. It's like there is no like search engine. There's your personal assistant, and it knows you better than what you know. It can follow trains of thought, and it can be always accessing information from all over that sort of networks people together, networks you with information that you're looking for. Oftentimes, there's a computer monitor in your room that will give you the lowdown on what you missed while you were asleep. Or they'll basically ping you on, local computers situated on the ship, for instance, or wherever you are, and you can basically access, the news of information that you might be interested in going through.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And they make coffee too?
Yeah, they can make coffee.
Okay.
It's interesting. They have many ways of receiving the coffee effect, right? It could be a crystal that can do it again, or they do like an eyedropper kind of thing, where you get like a water that's been given the format of that vibration, and you just put it on your tongue, and that's it. A lot of like pills and things like that. Usually, it's like an eyedropper thing on your tongue. Okay. Sometimes it's in your eye, but usually it's just in your mouth.
Okay. Do they have accolades or a way of rewarding someone for excellence?
They're saying no. You sort of do that for yourself.
Right.
You have, if you're a Pleiadian, you would have mental markers that would ground what you've done. And occasionally it's like sharing what you've done with someone. It's kind of like saying, hey, once I did this, isn't that great? That's kind of the extent.
Okay.
Right? It's kind of like you share your own achievements as it suits, as it comes up. But, do other people recognize you for doing things? Of course. And yes, they thank you. And there's a lot of, there can be cheering, like, wonderful, or they might have like a game of competition and, they win or something like that. They can say, yeah, you guys won. But, they don't do trophies. Really.
So no Olympic medals or anything like that.
That's different.
Yes.
You're right. They do have competitive games, and mostly it's an exercise of wit or an ability to adapt quickly. So it's very strategic based. But for instance, they actually adopted football, the touch football that we have.
Okay.
And they've been playing it because they actually want to play the real thing one day. The ones that are nearby, they basically, create a holographic, slightly holographic, a little bit more safe, sort of like turf environment.
Okay.
It's a lot smaller than ours. It's they don't have that kind of space on their ship to give a whole football field to. So it's more like a gymnasium-sized football game. And they will, do athletic events, running and stuff like that. And they will do a thing where, it's slated for like a week or two before it takes place, and everyone sort of like prepares themselves. And some of the time they may say, this includes, some rules like, can you take substances? And they say no substance for this. And it's like an honor system, right?
Right.
Can you go through, muscle alterations? You could, if that's the rules, that you could do muscle alterations because. And they don't usually do the muscle alterations. They found out that they tend to break bones and, hurt people pretty bad. And they're like, even in touch football, because they don't, they're like crash into each other, or they're like, inadvertently get each other into trouble. And they're working towards the full contact sport type of thing. And so they do realize that some of them do want to live, their life in other ways. So they will do a temporary stimulant thing. But usually it takes about a week to build up the muscles and then return to normal. Okay. So, there's some planning involved. So those events tend to be planned in advance, and then they'll go through it. They don't have all the little subtle rules that we have, like all the different different whistles for different fouls and things like that. It's much more open-ended. It's more like something a 9-year-old could figure out.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to get into?
Well, we're running near the end of the show time that I normally try to keep to at this point. So I'm gonna wrap this one up, and we can come back to Pleiadians in the future. Obviously.
Oh yeah, well, I think there's a lot to cover in this. And,
yes, it's a very large subject, and maybe people will think of new questions after.
Hey, and we may have people with their own contact experiences that can give us more.
That will be able to give us even more literals.
Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't
that would be great. I think there'd be a lot to share on the first-hand contact.
Yes.
And I would love to sort of like selfishly ask people to come here first, or contact me to share their first stories. But honestly, it's that's just because I'm excited for this subject. I don't really mean, come to us if you learn from us and it worked out for you.
Right.
So, anyhow, thank you everyone for joining us today. I love how active the chat room was today.
Yes.
I see a couple of new names. Welcome to the show. And, thank you, Don, for making it work. I know you're not at home today. You're on the road.
Last night in Seattle, so I'll be back home tomorrow night.
And if anybody wants to follow up, go to my Facebook page, Julien Wells public page. Go to my website, julienwells.com, and sign up for updates, and you'll get latest updates that are taking place on the page. You can also leave comments there. Leave comments in the YouTube video. And I've been reminded that subscribing to my YouTube channel is really helpful for me to be able to take this information further and to sort of expand the information over time. Which actually brings us, should we mention Saturday?
Sure.
So not this Saturday, but we're shooting for the Saturday following. We're going to introduce another show. Show where we are talking with exceptional individuals. Everyone's exceptional. We're going to be talking with particular individuals here on Earth that are doing all sorts of wonderful things in their communities. We're not going to name names because we haven't really gotten a list of people saying yes or no.
Are people that you're aware of, and also some people that you're not aware of that we find along the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if David Wilcock comes across this, of course, we'd love to have you. Corey Good as well. But if I think you've already sent them emails at this point.
Yes.
But so we're working on that, and Don's going to be the primary host for that. I'm going to participate in sort of like sideline offerings of thoughts, as it suits. But for the most part, we're bringing what they want to say and what we think is interesting. It might have to be subject oriented or specific.
I think we're going to find that quite often. But what we were talking about this weekend was, it seems like so much of the information that is available on the alternative media part of the internet relies on the negative. Also, we're rehashing things that are falling apart and events that are happening that are not the most positive. And there are people doing the work, and let's highlight that. And we'll talk to people that have got more ideas of where we're going to in the future, as opposed to where we've been in the past.
Yeah, and I'm all for all those, those approaches.
Yes.
Expansion rather than contraction, or if there's a discussion on contraction, it's for the sake of discovering the expansion that's within it.
Exactly.
So, again, it is a good time to wrap up. Thank you, Don, and
thank you, Julien.
We will see you next week. Cheers, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.